Thank you everyone for joining us on the next panel, Unlocking Financial Power and Equality Moonshot. Before I turn it over to our wonderful moderator and panelists, I would like to quickly emphasize how the transfer of global financial power to more women today and in the future means that it is even more important for leaders to recognize that unlocking more opportunities and tools for success for women require multi-layered efforts, particularly efforts to dispel the misconception that increasing opportunities for diverse groups constitute a zero-sum game. More opportunities for women and other historically underrepresented groups do not equate to fewer opportunities for those who have traditionally held power. With that, I'd like to give a warm welcome to Kasia Denbeck.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm so sorry not many of you are interested in financial freedom and in investing. I'm glad you've stayed. So we're going to talk about money. It's important. And I'm not going to be on stage on my own. I would immediately introduce my lovely speakers. Dr. Mara Catherine Harvey, who is a senior leader in finance and financial literacy advocate and also an author of many books. Hello, Mara. Have a seat. Constanze Schweinsteiger, partner and supervisory board member at Roland Berger. Hope I pronounced the last name correctly. Okay. Sahar Al-Bazar, Egyptian member of parliament and deputy chair of foreign affairs committee in the Egyptian parliament. And last but not least, Yalda Aukar, co-founder and partner of Bracket Capital, venture capital firm. Thank you very much. Ladies, yesterday at one point somebody said on this panel that money is power. And it is, and there is nothing wrong with that, because it's not just the power to rule the world. It's the power to give your children education, to start your own business, to do whatever you want to do with your life. So it's really, really important for all the women to be money literate, to know how to invest, to know how to manage their money and to think about money and not to give it away to men. So just one number, a study by the World Bank on the cost of gender inequality shows that countries across the world are losing 160 trillion in wealth because of differences in lifetime earnings between men and women. That's a staggering amount. So where does it all start, Mara? Because it doesn't start, when we're adults. I think it starts much earlier, that we're maybe not interested in learning about the money, or maybe we're told we shouldn't be interested.
So indeed, it does start in early childhood. And the financial socialization of girls is actually different than the financial socialization of boys. That means, and I will summarize it with one sentence, stereotyping everything, but just to give you the gist, we teach girls to spend and we teach boys to earn. And that's where it starts. And if we don't acknowledge that, we're actually not tackling the root causes. That goes on to being, I would say, less affinity for numbers. It translates into the topic of less representation in STEM, and then all the gaps, of course, that we see throughout professional life cycles all have their same root cause.
Okay. Constanze, do you think that if we solved the problem with a pay gap, that would solve the problem with the women's interest in money and maybe investing?
Unfortunately not, because I'm with Mara. If you haven't developed from early on a vision for yourself on you could become rich and wealthy and how you should invest your money. We just discussed, and I was interested to hear that you also have a number of friends, Yalda. Women tend to sit on their money, even if they earn a lot, even if there is no pay. Now, you're laughing. But I see it also in our company. I mean, the consultants, the female consultants sometimes talk to me, and it turns out very privately that they're not investing, they just have it on the bank account, all their earnings. While the guys from early on start to think about investment plans, and they start early on, and everybody that invests understands it's also a matter of time to become more wealthy. So no, it's not the pay gap.
Okay, it's not just the pay gap, it's a much more complex problem, but what do we do to solve it? What policies or what educational programs can we have to maybe mitigate, this difference?
Well, we have a lot of levels here. First of all, we need to change how the cultural norms is. Because some of the culture norms that is passed for women or girls since early age is having money will make you greedy. Having money and making you a businessman, businesswoman, or an investor or wealthy will lessen your chances to get married. So there is a fear around women when it comes to culture. So we need to work on advocacy, raising awareness among the communities. That's the first thing. The second thing, of course, policies. In Egypt, for example, we did amendments in 2017 on the investment law, and we made sure that women is equally having access to investments equally with men. So we put it into legislation so we can control and we can protect the rights of women. We also have the central bank, and we have the Egyptian stock market. They launched educational programs to raise the awareness on how to invest, how to manage money. So the central bank program is called Financial Literacy for All, and it's generalized on school level, and it's for boys and girls. The stock market investments is for like starting 11, 12, like this. It's not like a younger age. And they started to have apps that can allow young people and teenagers to invest in the stock market with amounts that is very cheap, around like 500 Egyptian pounds. So they can give them access, and they can try and learn by themselves.
Yeah, they can practice, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's a good idea. Yelda, you are not an example of a woman who's afraid of money and the power it gives. You are a founder of a venture capital fund. This is rare. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? How did you get to be the powerful woman around the money?
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you for being on such an amazing panel. I'm really inspired by all of you and very energized to be here. I like to tell the story of how I started my career because I think it went against many odds and it defied many expectations. And I hope that by sharing my story, I'm inspiring a few of you here to also go after your dreams. So I started my career in 2008 at Lehman Brothers. Not the best year to be at Lehman Brothers and not the best time to be in investment banking. So that was a very short-lived experience. It lasted 3 months. I was one of those leaving the Canary Wharf office with the cardboard boxes. I had my short moment of fame as enemy number 1 on the cover of the Daily Mail when they were ostracizing all the bankers. Anyways, long story short, I moved next door to Morgan Stanley. So I didn't have to change my commute. That was a good thing. And I started to cover the Gulf region. And then a few years later, I gained traction in the Gulf, and it was going pretty well. And I was hired by a mid-cap private equity firm called Investcorp to lead their office in Doha. And by the way, I never wanted to be a banker. The only reason I went into I wanted to be a policymaker. I studied government. And the only reason I went into investment banking is that because when I did my internship in 2007, the pound was at 2. And I had student loans to pay that were very, very high. And I was thinking, I'll do 2 years of investment banking, pay back those loans, and then pursue my dream of changing the world. Clearly, it didn't go as planned. But anyways, so I started working with Investcorp. This is about 2013. I'm leading their Doha office. And those are the years where you have all the sovereign wealth funds in the region that are actively allocating capital to US big tech companies. And unless you're a sovereign wealth fund, you're not getting access to the deal flow at all. So you probably remember when Saudi invested $2 billion into Uber, and that was considered extravagant. And the sexiest deal that you had at Investcorp was probably an air conditioning company in Arkansas. And 2013 also marked a year where there were a lot of political changes in the region when you had the new generation that was taking over from the old guard. So the new emir of Qatar was appointed, MBS in Saudi Arabia was also raising up. What people don't realize is that they were promoting people of our generation to key positions of power in capital allocation roles. And there was such a huge appetite to start allocating to VC. So I remember I was with the CEO of InvestCorp. We were in Milan. We were acquiring a men's fashion brand. Again, nothing to do with technology. And I had my business plan written up on how I had identified the pool of capital and the partners. And someone mentioned apps. So at that point, I used to have an account on AngelList. And I was getting in touch with some VC managers. And I would just participate in their syndicate. And by the way, that's really easy. Anyone can create an account on AngelList and start investing small amounts of capital into VC. Anyways, long story short, I pitched my business plan to the CEO of InvestCorp. I'm like, look, let's bring VC to InvestCorp. It is the trade of our generation. And he turned me down. I was 8 months pregnant with my first child. And I went back home and I told my husband, I'm going to resign and I'm going to set up my own VC. And he looked at me, he's like, you're crazy, you're out of your mind, this is the perfect setup for us. And it was the perfect setup because we had the perfect expat package living in the Gulf. And I did it. I told him I have a hunch. He's like, it's not a hunch, it's called hormones, you're 8 months pregnant, don't do it. I still did it. And I had identified my business partner in Los Angeles to go on this crazy adventure with me. And his condition was like, if you're able to raise a $50 million fund, then I'll come and I'll join you on this crazy idea. I'm like, great, so here's the woman that has to take the risk by herself and do the thing. Anyways, I delivered my baby, and in between figuring out how a newborn works for the first time, postpartum depression, mastitis, and everything else, I went and raised my first $50 million fund. And then the rest was history. We launched Bracket.
You're definitely not a typical, a risk-aware woman, are you? It's a great story. I know, Mara, you wrote a book about women and women's attitude towards risk. And even though during the previous panels, one of the panelists said, well, women like taking risks, we are kind of cautious. So what can you do? What can educational institutions do? What can families maybe do to encourage women to feel more confident about investing?
So I would actually subscribe to the fact that there's no one size fits all when it comes to women's attitudes towards risk, right? You've really got the full spectrum. But as Constanze pointed out, there are many, many women who have whatever amount of money it might be, big or small, who are not doing anything with it. And that's what I try to dedicate my focus to, which is when you talk to those women, often they tell you, I can't afford the equity market risk, right? I work too hard to earn this money, so I'm saving it, I'm keeping it safe. But what is needed is to shift their concept of risk. Because the biggest risk that any given woman on average faces is not maintaining their life quality after retirement. And when you start pushing that focus of what risks are you taking without even being conscious about it, you can have a different conversation along the lines of, with any amount of money you can start investing, but you've got to start.
Constanze, I think women kind of tend to, the research shows that women kind of tend to invest in a different way than men, maybe according to their values or something they really believe in. When you look at your customers, your clients, your friends that you mentioned before, do you see that difference?
Yes, I think we can see it, and there's also data that shows it, and it's usually around purpose. Women tend to think about things also in a broader context. We heard about this during the last 2 days. If you've witnessed or listened to some of the panels, it's a repeating theme throughout the panels that women tend to see the broader picture, and that they want to see the broader picture. They're not only interested in the A to B, do I gain max profit out of it, but they want to know where does the profit come from. So they connect the dots, and this is what we usually do, and we also tend to do it in the investment. Yeah.
And Sahar, what do you think the world, the society would benefit? Mara mentioned already the retirement, that period when women really, lose on not investing before. But what would the world of business, what would the social world, what would women in general earn from better educating women around finances, for making them more, more powerful?
Yeah. So definitely on a country level and global level, shifting women from just consumers into being a player and contributor to the economy definitely will change the shape of the economy. We'll have more investments, we will have more businesses, we will hire more people, we will provide more job opportunities, and above all, it will give women the independence. And it's something that is very close to my heart, that when women are independent in their choices, it lessens the chances of being faced and encountered by domestic violence. So this is also will decrease the rates of domestic violence. So it's socially positive, it's economically positive. So definitely we need more women. And as you mentioned, women also invest in maybe different ways and different projects, which will open up untapped markets and opportunities that was not in the economy without them.
Okay, Yilde, you're obviously a special woman and very apt with money, and your story shows that you know how to raise funds, but it's not the same with every woman, even those who are very entrepreneurial and build their own startups, build their own businesses. But many studies show that women do not have the same access to funding. How do you have a piece of advice for them? How do you make sure that you get the money you need to develop your business?
Yeah, it's very worrying. So out of the $500 billion that was allocated to venture capital in the US last year, less than 2% went to women-led VCs. And there are less than 5% of VCs that are actually women-led. So those numbers are staggering. The problem is that men monopolize the networks that are conducive to capital raising. And in my opinion, before you have to have an ecosystem that is welcoming of women. And both Sahar and I are from the Middle East, and I'm proud to say that I've been witnessing much more radical changes happening in the Middle East at the moment than I am seeing in Silicon Valley. I'm actually seeing, and I mentioned it yesterday, I'm not sure which world is actually more worrying, the patriarchal society of the Middle East or the chauvinistic world of MAGA hat wearing Trump tech bras that we're seeing in Silicon Valley at the moment. So you need the networks, you need ecosystem that put the women at the forefront, give them the opportunities to access capital. I can give some examples in the Middle East. I'm sure Sahar is familiar with them. You have Playbook, which is a membership club for women in business that their mission is to make sure that you're getting in front of those advisors and that you have access to the rooms, as opposed to by design being excluded for these rooms. So I think my advice is build your networks, play on your strength. As women, we have different strength than men, and I was saying this yesterday as well. I really feel that women are just much better at developing really long-standing relationships with potential business partners, whereas men are more in the business of spraying their networks, which is not necessarily, in my opinion, the way that you really build successful ventures and have capital that will stay with you in the very long term. So play to your strength, participate in the networks. If you're women and on boards of companies, you can also vote with your money, obviously, and require that the capital allocation and the portfolios, the diversified portfolio of your respective corporate venture capital arms have X percentage that goes to women startups. So yeah, these are some examples of the way that we can make sure that the ecosystem is more conducive to success for female entrepreneurs.
Okay, so we have to start with finding allies. That's something that comes back during all the panels. I think looking for allies is always good. Building your network. What is always surprising for me. I'm going to ask this next question to Mara. It's always surprising to me that in almost every country, in banks, in financial institutions, there's a lot of women, managing people's money, but they're in middle management roles, and they don't go as far as CEOs or boardrooms. So it does mean that if they can manage, people's money in the bank, it's not that they are not good with money, but how do you make education about finances more appealing to women so that they take the step further, so they don't stay on the middle ground?
So, in my experience, so many women who I've encountered have said, I would love to start investing, I just don't know where to start. And very often there is, I would say, a cultural component of feeling comfortable having a conversation on a topic that you don't feel knowledgeable about. And now there are two flaws to that. The first is that the women tell me, I'm not knowledgeable about finance, therefore I can't go and speak to the banker. And I always tell them, well, if you had a heart problem, would you first go study medicine before you're going to go and see your doctor? I mean, this is ridiculous. And it is such a perception gap that is in our own heads and that we first and foremost need to overcome. This is why the topic of safe spaces for women to start engaging in financial conversations is so important, because we do have this self-made perception gap in our heads, and creating a space for that perception to go away is one of the first most important elements. And the second flaw for many women, myself included up to about 15 years ago, was to believe that you didn't have enough money to invest. And we really need to overcome that hurdle as well, because nothing could be further from the truth.
So you can just start with very little money, right? Just to exercise your investment abilities. Constanza, we had an interesting conversation before the panel about the succession process going on now with really wealthy families, giving, the patriarchs dying and the family members staying with the money. And it's not just the sons; it's very often daughters. So, what is it the moment for women to start to learn about investment?
It should be, but as Mara pointed out, it doesn't come naturally. So it's something that comes by choice, and I think depending on the family background and how far the women have been involved and treated by their fathers, or usually it's fathers that have built up the wealth. So let's put it that way. So it depends on how from early on they were involved or not. And we discussed it before, that I said it won't be by nature that all these women out of the blue will start to invest and to think, oh my God, I'm powerful now, I can change things, I can invest into projects that I think are important. But a lot of them most likely will sit back and have male investors dealing with their funds and their money and the wealth. And I think this is something to think about. So really, wake up. Wake up, women, it's time to act, and it's never too late to learn how to invest.
This is the time. How do you, Sahar, teach or talk about money with in your country? How do you spread the knowledge about investing?
As I mentioned, for me, this topic is very empowering to people. Even women, children, everyone needs to know how to manage money and how to invest and how to save. So on my personal contribution to community, I do workshops and I try to empower women. But on my official role as an MP, I make sure that the legislative work is in place. And for example, I worked on the inheritance law, which makes sure that women gets their part of the inheritance, which will give her access to wealth, and she can invest. Because in some rural areas and communities, male figures, whether it's the father, the brother, the husband, if she is going to inherit $1 million, They can give her like 50,000 Egyptian pounds and say, that's enough for you. We are the ones who work. We are the ones who put the food on the table. We need this money. This doesn't work. So we needed to protect women through policies and legislative work. So yeah, that's mainly what I try to do and try to spread, not only on national level, but also I use my global hat because I'm on board of different global parliamentary networks where I try as much as I can advocate among other MPs in different countries that they also push policies and regulations that will protect women and will empower them and give them the rights, whether it's inheritance or access to investment, or ask their own governments from central bank and other ministries to give access to loans. Like one of the projects that we worked on with the Ministry of Social Solidarity, that we give loan for women who never had an investment before, or they never had a business before and they are scared to have their own business. We are giving them the seed funding with no interest rate. It's interest free. So they don't fear paying back with interest, because it's also the liability that makes them resist the idea. So yeah, that's what we do.
These are great initiatives. Yalda, I have one last question for you, because I was wondering what made you confident about investing? What was the one thing that helped you feel like, I can do that. I can raise that 50 million, right? Was that 50 million?
Yeah. I grew up in the Middle East. I'm just very comfortable with chaos, conflicts, volatility, and instability. So I think I just gravitate naturally to risk-taking environments. But I wanted to add a point about literacy. I think investment literacy is incredibly important, and I know that we have many parents in this room, and you can advocate that your schools start teaching investment literacy to your children very early on. And sometimes investing alone can be daunting, but if you invest as a community, so for example, I have a WhatsApp group with some of my girlfriends, and it's all about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and we go at it together. So if you're in a group and you're bouncing ideas and it's not an environment that's daunting or that's making you insecure, it'll give you the courage that you need to get the knowledge, share the knowledge, not be afraid of making mistakes, have close people that are not going to judge you to bounce ideas off of. And that's a very easy place to start. And just create an account on IBKR or eToro, start with a small amount and then build it from there.
Okay, Mara wanted to build on this for just one
Absolutely.
minute.
I'd just like to make a call to action to every single person in this room, whether you have children yourself or whether there are any children in your ecosystem. Because while we do need financial literacy in schools, it's proven that a girl's confidence is shaped by age 5, and children's money attitudes are shaped for life by age 7. And that means we can't rely only on schools. We need parental engagement.
Okay, so let's give power to the children. Let's give them their pocket money and teach them to invest, right? Thank you very much for the great conversation. Thank you for listening, staying with us. Thank you.
Thank you.